The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, just like it had every year for the past 47 years. Admiral Daniel Hayes sat alone in his office, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, and read the words on his screen. The Galactic Council invited Earth to send representatives to the annual summit on Vareth Prime. They promised friendship. They promised protection. They promised a place among the stars. Daniel deleted the message without reply. His second-in-command, Commander Lisa Grant, walked into the office with 2 cups of coffee. She set one on his desk and took the seat across from him. Her eyes moved to the empty screen. "Another invitation?" she asked. "Another invitation," Daniel confirmed. He took the coffee and drank. 47 years they have been asking. 47 years we have been saying no. Lisa nodded slowly. She understood why better than most people on Earth. The Galactic Council was not what it claimed to be. On the surface, it looked like a peaceful union of 400 alien species working together for the common good. But underneath that pretty picture was something much darker. Every species that joined the Council had to give up its military. Every species had to rely on the Council fleet for protection. And every species that relied on the Council fleet discovered the same terrible truth. The Council protected no one. They watched member worlds burn. They let invasions happen. They did nothing while billions died. The Council existed for one purpose only. It kept younger species weak and afraid. It made sure no civilization could ever grow strong enough to challenge the old powers. "They think we are fools," Lisa said quietly. "They think we will eventually get scared enough to join." Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Let them think what they want. We have been busy while they have been waiting." He pressed a button on his desk, and the wall behind him changed. Instead of blank metal, it now showed a view of space. But this was not the space that satellites showed to the public. This was the real picture, the one that only 2,000 people on Earth knew existed. Hidden in the asteroid belt, buried inside hollowed-out rocks and covered by sensor-blocking technology, was a fleet. Not the small collection of patrol ships that Earth showed to the galaxy. This was something else entirely. Thousands of warships waited in the darkness. Carriers bigger than anything the Council had ever built. Destroyers armed with weapons that human scientists had spent 50 years perfecting. And at the center of it all, a command ship so massive that it made everything else look like toys. The project was called Operation Silent Forge. It had begun before Daniel was born. His father had worked on it. His grandfather had helped design the first prototypes. 3 generations of the Hayes family had dedicated their lives to one simple goal. When the day came that Earth needed to fight, Earth would be ready. "How long until full readiness?" Lisa asked. 6 months, Daniel replied. "Maybe less if we push hard." Far away, in a part of space that human ships had never visited, another meeting was taking place. The Great Hall of Vareth Prime was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Creatures of every shape and size sat in their designated sections. Some breathed oxygen. Some breathed methane. Some did not breathe at all. But they all had one thing in common. They all served the Council. At the front of the hall, on a raised platform that showed his importance, stood High Arbiter Zoloth of the Kelthari Dominion. His scales were dark green, almost black, and his eyes held the cold intelligence of a predator. The Kelthari had ruled the Council for 3,000 years. They had crushed rebellions. They had broken empires. They had never once lost a war. "The humans continue to reject our offers," Zoloth announced. His voice echoed through the hall. 47 times we have extended the hand of friendship. 47 times they have slapped it away." Murmurs spread through the assembled representatives. Some were confused. Humans were a young species on a single planet. Why did the High Arbiter care so much about them? Ambassador Vela of the Morath Collective raised one of her many clawed limbs. Her species looked like insects the size of horses, with shells that gleamed like metal. "High Arbiter, why does this concern us? The humans are primitive. They have no hyperspace capability. They cannot leave their own system. Let them rot on their little world. Zoloth's lips pulled back to show his teeth. It was not a smile. You do not understand, Ambassador. The humans are dangerous precisely because they refuse to submit. Other species see their defiance. Other species begin to wonder if they too could refuse. If we allow one world to stand apart, others will try to follow. Other species begin to time. He paused and let his words sink in. The humans must be made an example. They must learn what happens to those who reject the Council's generosity. A heavy silence fell over the hall. Everyone understood what Zoloth meant. The Kelthari did not make threats lightly. When they decided to punish a species, they did not stop until nothing remained. What do you propose? Vela asked carefully. Zoloth gestured, and a holographic display appeared above the platform. It showed Earth, a blue and green jewel floating in the black. Around it were a handful of small ships, barely worth noticing. The image zoomed out to show the rest of the solar system. Empty, undefended, weak. We will assemble a fleet, Zoloth said. Not just Kelthari ships. Ships from every loyal council member. 2,000 vessels carrying the combined might of a dozen species. We will appear in their sky and give them one chance to surrender. If they refuse, we will burn their world to ash. Some representatives shifted uncomfortably. Genocide was not something spoken of openly, even in the council. But no one objected. No one dared. When do we begin? Vela asked. 6 months passed faster than anyone expected. On Earth, life continued as normal for most people. They went to work. They raised their families. They watched television and argued about politics. They had no idea that their entire world was about to change. But beneath the surface, in hidden bases scattered across the planet and throughout the solar system, thousands of men and women worked without rest. Ships that had waited in darkness for decades received their final upgrades. Weapons systems were tested and tested again. Crews ran simulation after simulation until they could fight in their sleep. Kevin Porter was one of those people who knew the truth. He worked at Deep Space Monitoring Station 7, a facility that officially tracked asteroids but actually watched for alien ships. Kevin was 32 years old, with tired eyes and hands that shook from too much coffee. He had not slept more than 4 hours a night in weeks. On the morning everything changed, Kevin was staring at his screen and trying to stay awake when something impossible happened. A light appeared at the edge of the solar system. Then another. Then 100 more. Kevin sat up straight. His hands stopped shaking. He ran the numbers 3 times because he did not want to believe them, but the numbers did not lie. 2,000 energy signatures. 2,000 ships dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The Council fleet had arrived. Director, Kevin said into his communicator. His voice was steady, but his heart was pounding. We have contact. Multiple contacts. This is not a drill. Director Sandra Mitchell arrived at his station within minutes. She was a small woman, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Kevin's screen for exactly 3 seconds before turning away. Get me Admiral Hayes, she ordered, and activate Protocol Sunrise. The words went out across secret channels that stretched around the world and into space. Protocol Sunrise. The code that everyone had trained for but hoped they would never have to use. It meant only one thing. The enemy was here. In bases on every continent, lights flickered on. Crews who had been sleeping woke up and ran to their stations. In the asteroid belt, massive doors slid open on rocks that had looked dead for years. Ships that had never flown before powered up their engines for the first time. High Commander Threll stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched Earth grow larger on his view screen. The ship was called Dominion's Wrath, and it was the pride of the Kelthari fleet. 2 kilometers long, armed with enough weapons to crack a moon. Crewed by the best soldiers his species had ever produced. Around it floated the rest of the Armada, a wall of metal and fire that had never known defeat. Threll was tall even for a Kelthari, with scales that had darkened to deep black with age. He had commanded fleets for 60 years. He had conquered 30 worlds. He had never felt anything but confidence before battle. But something about this mission bothered him. "Tactical officer," he said. "Show me the human defenses again." His tactical officer, a Morath named Vrix, brought up the display. It showed the handful of patrol ships orbiting Earth. Small, weak, barely worth noticing. "This is everything?" Threll asked. "Everything our sensors can detect, Commander. The humans have no significant military presence. They are completely unprepared." Threll nodded slowly. But the unease did not leave him. 47 years, the humans had refused to join the Council. 47 years, they had ignored every threat and every offer. Species did not survive that long by being stupid. So why did they seem so helpless? He pushed the thought aside. It did not matter. Whatever tricks the humans might have, they could not stand against 2,000 warships. "Open a channel to the human settlement," Threll commanded. "Let them see what has come for them." 4. His communications officer worked the controls, and soon, Threll's image was being broadcast across every screen on Earth. Every television, every computer, every phone showed the alien commander standing on his bridge with his fleet visible behind him. "People of Earth," Threll announced in a voice that had made entire planets surrender. "You have been given chances beyond measure to join the galactic community in peace. You have refused. Your stubbornness ends today. You will surrender your world. You will dismantle your weapons. You will submit to Council rule. You have 6 hours to comply. If you refuse, we will destroy everything you have ever built. Your cities will burn. Your people will die. Your name will be forgotten. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. Across Earth, billions of people stared at their screens in shock. Some cried. Some prayed. Some ran into the streets in panic. The government channels stayed silent. No response came from any human authority. Threll watched the blue planet and waited. He expected pleas for mercy. He expected desperate negotiations. He expected the humans to beg. Instead, he got nothing. 1 hour passed. Then 2. Then 3. Earth sent no message. No surrender. No defiance. Nothing at all. "Commander," Vrix said nervously, "they are not responding. Perhaps their communications systems have failed." "Perhaps," Threll replied, but he did not believe it. In the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Daniel Hayes stood before a wall of screens showing the alien fleet. His senior staff surrounded him, all of them watching and waiting for his orders. Lisa Grant stood at his side, her face calm despite the fear that everyone felt. "Sir, the protocol is active. All units report ready. We can launch at your command." Daniel did not respond immediately. He was looking at the alien ships, counting them, measuring them. 2,000 vessels. Just as his spy had reported, the Council had sent everything they had. "Good. Not yet," he said quietly. "Let them wait. Let them wonder." High Commander Threll stood on his bridge and felt something he had not felt in 60 years of warfare. Fear. The humans still had not responded. Not a single transmission. Not a single ship launched to meet them. Not even a distress signal sent to beg for help from the Council species they had rejected. Earth just sat there, blue and green and silent, like it was waiting for something. "Commander," his communications officer said, "we are receiving reports from other ships. Crews are becoming anxious. They want to know why we have not attacked." Threll understood their confusion. In every previous conquest, the enemy had reacted by now. They had sent desperate fleets to fight. They had tried to negotiate. They had done something. This silence was not natural. This silence felt like a trap, But what kind of trap could a primitive species set against 2,000 warships? We wait, Threll said firmly. The deadline has not passed. We gave them 6 hours. We will honor that deadline. 30 minutes remained. In the command center beneath the mountains, Admiral Daniel Hayes watched a countdown timer on his screen. When it reached 0, everything would change. He looked around at his staff, at the men and women who had dedicated their lives to this moment, and he felt a surge of pride. All units, he said into his communicator, prepare for revelation. On my mark, drop all sensor screens and power up weapons. Across the solar system, hidden crews acknowledged the order. In asteroid bases and moon installations and ships buried in debris fields, hands moved to controls and waited. The timer hit 0. Mark, Daniel said. Space itself seemed to shimmer. In a dozen locations throughout the solar system, the sensor-blocking technology that had hidden humanity's fleet for 50 years switched off. What had looked like empty space or dead rocks suddenly resolved into something else entirely. On the bridge of Dominion's Wrath, alarms screamed to life. Vrix stared at his tactical display with eyes that had gone wide with terror. "Commander," he shouted, "we are detecting new contacts. Hundreds of new contacts. No, wait. Thousands." Threll rushed to the display and felt his blood turn cold. Ships were appearing everywhere. They emerged from asteroids that had seemed hollow. They rose from craters on moons that had seemed abandoned. They materialized in space that had seemed completely empty. And they were not the primitive vessels that Council intelligence had predicted. These ships were massive, sleek and deadly, covered in weapons arrays that pulsed with energy. Carriers that dwarfed anything the Kelthari had ever built, launched wave after wave of fighters. Destroyers moved into formation with a precision that spoke of decades of training. And at the center of the human fleet, hanging in space like a steel mountain, was a command ship so enormous that it made Threll's flagship look like a shuttle. The ship was called Unity, and it was the heart of everything humanity had built. On its bridge, Admiral Daniel Hayes stood before his view screen and felt the moment he had waited his entire life for. The enemy was here. The trap was sprung. Now it was time for the Council to learn the truth. "Open a channel to the alien flagship," he ordered. His communications officer complied, and Daniel's image appeared on Threll's screen. The human admiral was calm, almost relaxed, standing with his hands clasped behind his back. "High Commander Threll," Daniel said in a voice that carried across both fleets. "I am Admiral Daniel Hayes of the United Earth Defense Force. You came to our home with 2,000 ships and expected us to surrender. You see, now that we have matched your numbers, in fact, we have exceeded them." Threll stared at the human with a mixture of disbelief and growing horror. His tactical display showed the true scope of the disaster. The human fleet was not just equal to his, it was larger. And the energy readings coming from those ships suggested weapons technology that was supposed to be impossible. "This cannot be real," Threll whispered. "Our intelligence showed nothing. Our scans detected nothing. Your intelligence saw exactly what we wanted you to see," Daniel continued, as if reading Threll's thoughts. "For 50 years, your council watched us and laughed at the primitive humans stuck on their little planet. You never wondered why we did not expand. You never asked what we were doing instead. You assumed we were weak because we did not show you our strength." Daniel stepped closer to the camera, and his eyes were hard as iron. "You were wrong." On ships throughout the council fleet, crews watched the human admiral with growing terror. They had come here expecting an easy conquest. They had expected to crush a helpless species and return home as heroes. Instead, they had flown into a trap set by enemies who had been preparing for this moment longer than some of them had been alive. "The choice is yours, Commander," Daniel said. "You can turn your fleet around and leave our system. You can return to your council and tell them that Earth is not a target anymore. Or you can fight. But if you choose to fight, understand this. We have spent 50 years building weapons your scientists cannot even imagine. We have trained crews who have practiced for this battle since they were children. and we have absolutely no intention of losing. Threll looked at his tactical display. He looked at the massive human fleet that had appeared from nothing. He thought about what it would mean to return to Council space in defeat, to face High Arbiter Zoloth and admit that the humans had beaten him without firing a shot. The first wave of Council weapons fire was enough to destroy a planet. Plasma bolts hotter than the surface of a star. Missiles carrying warheads that could crack mountains. Kinetic rounds accelerated to speeds that turned metal into vapor on impact. 2,000 ships poured everything they had at the human fleet. The humans did not dodge. They did not scatter. They simply waited. And then the weapons hit. On every human ship, shields that had been invisible a moment before blazed into existence. They glowed bright blue, absorbing the Council attack, like water, absorbing rain. The plasma bolts splashed against them and vanished. The missiles detonated harmlessly against barriers that did not even flicker. The kinetic rounds bounced away into the void. On the Unity, Tactical Officer Nathan Cole watched his displays with calm satisfaction. Shield integrity holding at 98% across the fleet. Admiral, their weapons are barely making contact. Admiral Daniel Hayes nodded. This was exactly what 50 years of preparation had bought them. Human scientists had studied every piece of alien technology they could find. They had analyzed Council weapons systems from wrecks and stolen data, and they had built shields specifically designed to stop those weapons. The enemy fleet is continuing their advance, Lisa Grant reported from her station. They do not seem to understand what just happened. Daniel almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Return fire, he ordered. Precision targeting only. I want their engines and weapons disabled. I want survivors. The human fleet responded as one. Rails guns fired projectiles at a fraction of the speed of light. The rounds crossed the distance between the fleets in heartbeats and punched through Council shields like they were made of paper. Laser batteries that drew power directly from ship reactors carved lines of destruction through enemy formations. Missiles with guidance systems that could track a single ship through a debris field found their targets with perfect accuracy. In the first 30 seconds of return fire, 200 Council ships went dark. On the bridge of Dominion's Wrath, Threll watched his fleet dying and could not believe what he was seeing. His weapons, the weapons that had conquered 60 worlds, did nothing to the humans. But their weapons cut through his best ships like they were made of cloth. Evasive action, he screamed. All ships, break formation. Do not let them target you. But his orders came too late. The human guns did not miss. The human missiles did not fail. Everywhere Threll looked, Council ships were losing power, spinning out of control, becoming dead metal, drifting in the void. And the humans were not even trying to kill them. Nathan Cole noticed it first. Admiral, enemy casualties are minimal. Our strikes are disabling ships, not destroying them. Their crews are alive. Good, Daniel replied. That is exactly what I wanted. Lisa looked at him with surprise. Sir? We could end this now. A few direct hits to their reactors and their fleet would be gone. And then what? Daniel asked. He kept his eyes on the battle, watching as another wave of Council ships fell to precise human fire. We destroy their fleet, and they send another. We destroy that one, and they send a third. The Council has thousands of ships. We cannot kill our way to peace. He turned to face her. But if we beat them so badly that they have no choice but to negotiate, if we show them that fighting us is pointless, then maybe we can end this without burning the galaxy down. The battle continued. But it was not really a battle anymore. It was a demonstration. The Council ships tried to fight. They tried to run. They tried to regroup and find some tactic that would work against the human fleet. Nothing succeeded. Human ships moved through the enemy formation like wolves among sheep. Their shields absorbed everything thrown at them. Their weapons found every target. And they never once went for killing blows. After 90 minutes, over half the Council fleet was disabled. Ships drifted with dead engines, their weapons destroyed, their crews trapped but alive. The remaining vessels had clustered around Threll's flagship in a desperate defensive formation, but everyone knew it was hopeless. On the Unity, Lisa reviewed the battle data and shook her head in wonder. 7 human ships damaged, none critically. 0 casualties. Sir, they cannot touch us. They never could, Daniel said quietly. This was never about proving we could win. This was about proving that fighting us is suicide. He opened a channel to the crippled Council fleet. High Commander Threll, this battle is over. Your fleet is broken. More than half your ships are disabled. The rest will follow if you continue to fight. But I am offering you a chance to end this now. Threll's image appeared on the view screen. The proud commander who had threatened Earth just hours ago was gone. In his place was something broken, a warrior who had just learned that everything he believed about his own power was a lie. What do you want? Threll asked. His voice was hollow. A conversation, Daniel replied. Something your council has never been willing to have with us as equals. You came here to conquer us. We are not interested in being conquered. But we are also not interested in conquest ourselves. We want to talk. We want to find a way forward that does not involve more death. Threll was silent for a long moment. Around him, his surviving ships waited for orders. His crews waited to learn if they would live or die. If I refuse? He finally asked. Then, we finish what we started, Daniel said simply. Your ships become debris. Your crews become memories. And we wait for the next fleet your council sends, and do the same thing again. We can keep doing this as long as you want. We have been preparing for 50 years. We have the ships. We have the weapons. We have the patience. Lokes then. And offended? We have the patience. He paused. Or you can accept that the universe just changed and try to change with it. Threll closed his eyes. In 60 years of command, he had never surrendered. He had never even considered it. But he was also not a fool. The humans had won. They had won so completely that continued fighting was not courage. It was suicide. What are your terms? He asked. Your fleet will withdraw to the edge of this system, Daniel said. You will power down weapons and wait. I will send representatives to discuss next steps. If your council is willing to talk, really talk, then maybe we can find a way to end this without more blood. The news of the battle reached council space within days. It spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass, and everywhere it went, it changed everything. On Vareth Prime, High Arbiter Zoloth sat alone in his chambers and stared at the reports in disbelief. His fleet, the greatest military force ever assembled, had been destroyed by a species that was supposed to be primitive. Ships that had conquered 60 worlds had been brushed aside like insects, and the humans had not even been trying to kill. That last part bothered him most of all. If the humans had simply destroyed the fleet, Zoloth could have understood. That was what any other species would have done. That was what the Kelthari would have done. But the humans had shown mercy. They had disabled ships instead of destroying them. They had let crews live when they could have easily killed them all. It meant the humans were not afraid. It meant they were so confident in their power that they did not need to prove anything through slaughter. And that terrified Zoloth more than any weapon ever could. Messages began arriving from across the galaxy. Other council members wanted to know what had happened. They wanted to know what would happen next. They wanted to know if they were safe. Zoloth had no answers for them. 3 months after the battle, a new summit was announced. But this time, it would not be held on Vareth Prime. This time, the meeting would take place on a human station at the edge of Earth's solar system. A station called Horizon. Ambassador Megan Spencer was chosen to lead the human delegation. She was 53 years old, with silver hair and eyes that had seen enough political battles to know how this one needed to go. She had spent her career working for the day when humanity would finally step onto the galactic stage. Now that day had come, and she intended to make it count. The council sent representatives from 200 species. Some came eagerly, curious about the humans who had done the impossible. Others came reluctantly, afraid of what might happen if they refused. And a few came with hatred in their hearts, dreaming of revenge for the humiliation they had suffered. High Arbiter Zoloth was among them. The first meeting took place in a large chamber at the heart of Horizon Station. Human and alien representatives sat across from each other at a long table. Armed guards from both sides stood along the walls, watching and waiting. Megan stood and addressed the assembly. "Let us be clear about why we are here," she said. Her voice was calm, but carried to every corner of the room. "For centuries, your council has operated on a simple principle. You were stronger than other species, so you had the right to rule them. You offered protection that was really control. You demanded obedience, and called it partnership." She paused and looked directly at Zoloth. "That system ends now. Not because we want to replace you. Not because we want revenge for what you tried to do to us. But because genuine progress cannot happen when one group holds all the power and uses it to keep others down." Zoloth leaned forward. His scales were darker than usual, flushed with anger he was struggling to control. "You speak of progress," he said coldly, "but you have shown nothing except military power. You humiliated our fleet. You made us look weak. And now you lecture us about cooperation? Why should we believe anything you say?" Admiral Daniel Hayes, present as a military advisor to the delegation, answered before Megan could speak. "Because we could have destroyed your fleet," he said simply. "We could have killed every soldier you sent against us. We could have launched attacks on your homeworlds while your ships were busy dying in our system. We did none of those things." He stood and walked to a display screen that showed a map of the galaxy. "The Council has 400 member species. You control thousands of worlds. Your combined military, even after what happened to the fleet you sent to Earth, is still larger than anything we could build in a century. If we wanted to rule you through fear, we would have to spend generations fighting and conquering and holding territory." He turned back to face the assembled representatives. "We are not interested in empires. We spent 50 years building a fleet because we knew that someday you would come for us, and we wanted to survive. We have survived. Now we want something more. We want to build relationships with other species based on respect, not fear. We want to trade and learn and explore together. We want to show you that there is another way to organize a galaxy." Silence fell over the chamber. Many of the alien representatives looked uncertain. They had lived their entire lives under council rule. The idea that things could be different was hard to imagine, but not everyone was opposed. Ambassador Vela of the Morath Collective raised one of her clawed limbs. "And if we refuse? If we decide that we do not want to change?" Megan answered her. "Then we will defend ourselves against any attack, just as we did before. But we will not strike first. We will not force anyone to accept our way of doing things. If the Council wants to continue as it has been, among species that choose to remain members, that is your right." She looked around the room. "But we believe that once other species see there is an alternative, many of them will choose differently. We believe that cooperation works better than domination. We believe that trust is stronger than fear, and we are willing to prove it." The negotiations continued for weeks. There were arguments and threats, and moments when it seemed like everything would collapse into war. But slowly, painfully, something new began to take shape. They called it the Framework Accords, a new system for organizing relations between species. Under the Accords, each species retained full sovereignty over their own worlds. No one could be forced to join anything. Military threats were prohibited. Disputes would be resolved through talking, not fighting. Not everyone signed. The Kelthari refused, retreating to their own space with promises that this was not over. Several other species followed them, clinging to the old ways because they were afraid of the new ones. But most species joined. They looked at the humans and saw something they had never seen before. A powerful species that did not want to conquer them. A people who had built weapons capable of destroying anything in their path and chosen not to use them. A civilization that believed in something beyond pure strength. It was strange. It was frightening. But it was also hopeful, in a way the galaxy had not felt in a very long time. On the last day of the summit, Megan Spencer stood before the assembled representatives one final time. "This is not the end of history," she said. "This is just the beginning. There will be challenges ahead. There will be misunderstandings and conflicts, and moments when all of this seems like it was a mistake. But we believe it is worth trying. We believe that species can learn to live together without one group controlling all the others. We believe the galaxy can be better than it has been." She looked at the faces around her. Alien and human alike. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Sol. 1 year since humanity had revealed itself to the galaxy. 1 year since everything changed. On Earth, President Carol Adams stood before the United Nations General Assembly and prepared to give the most important speech of her life. Representatives from every nation watched her. Cameras broadcast her image to billions of people around the world. And for the first time in human history, delegates from alien species sat in the audience as honored guests. 1 year ago, Carol began, our planet faced extinction. An armada of 2,000 ships came to our solar system with orders to destroy us. They believed we were weak. They believed we would surrender. They believed wrong. She paused and looked at the assembled crowd. But this speech is not about that battle. We have spoken enough about victory and weapons and shields. Today, I want to talk about what comes next. Outside the building, crowds had gathered to watch the speech on massive screens. The mood was celebration mixed with uncertainty. Humanity had survived its greatest challenge. But the future remained unknown. For 50 years, Carol continued, we prepared in secret. We built weapons and trained soldiers because we knew the universe was dangerous. We were right to prepare. That preparation saved our world. But preparation is not enough. We cannot spend the next 50 years hiding behind our shields, waiting for the next attack. We need to move forward. We need to become part of something larger. In the audience, Admiral Daniel Hayes sat beside Commander Lisa Grant. Both wore civilian clothes for the first time in months. Both felt strange, without the weight of uniforms on their shoulders. The Admiral looks uncomfortable, Lisa whispered. Speeches are harder than battles, Daniel replied quietly. In battles, you know who the enemy is. On stage, Carol was describing the framework accords and what they meant for humanity. Trade agreements with dozens of species. Cultural exchanges. Scientific partnerships. For the first time ever, humans would travel beyond their own solar system. For the first time ever, alien visitors would walk on Earth's surface. This will not be easy, Carol admitted. There are species out there who still hate us. There are old powers who will never accept a galaxy where they do not control everything. We will face challenges we cannot predict and enemies we have not yet met. She straightened her shoulders. But humanity has never been afraid of hard work. We have never backed down from challenges, and we will not start now. Axon. The speech ended to thunderous applause. Humans and aliens alike stood and cheered for a future that suddenly seemed full of possibility. 6 months later, the first human exploration vessel prepared to leave the solar system. The ship was called Pathfinder, a modified version of the warships that had defended Earth. Its weapons had been reduced to make room for scientific equipment and living quarters. Its crew was a mix of military officers and civilian scientists, chosen from thousands of volunteers. Admiral Hayes had been asked to command the mission, but he had refused. My war is over, he told the selection committee. The next chapter belongs to someone else. Instead, the command went to Captain Sarah Wells, a former fighter pilot who had distinguished herself during the battle. At 34, she was young for such responsibility, but she had a quality that the committee valued above experience. She was curious. She wanted to know what was out there. On the morning of departure, Sarah stood on the bridge of Pathfinder and looked at the stars. Her crew worked at their stations around her, running final checks and preparing systems for the jump to hyperspace. Everything was ready. "Captain," her navigation officer called out. "We are receiving a transmission from Earth. Admiral Hayes wishes to speak with you." Sarah smiled. She had trained under Hayes for 3 years. He was as close to a father figure as she had in her adult life. "Put him through." A. Daniel's face appeared on the main screen. He was standing in his office, the same underground room where he had commanded the defense of Earth. He looked older than Sarah remembered. Tired, but at peace. "Captain Wells," Daniel said formally. Then he smiled. "Sarah, I wanted to wish you luck before you go." "Thank you, sir." Daniel nodded slowly. 50 years we spent building a fleet to defend ourselves. 50 years hiding in the dark, waiting for enemies to find us. You get to do something better. You get to go out there and see what the universe really looks like. Sarah felt her throat tighten. "We would not have this chance without what you built, without what your family sacrificed." "Maybe," Daniel agreed. "But building weapons was the easy part. Anyone can build weapons when they are scared. The hard part is what comes after. The hard part is learning to trust, learning to explore instead of conquer, learning to see strangers as potential friends instead of inevitable enemies." He looked directly at the camera, and his eyes held a weight that Sarah understood now in a way she never had before. "Do not waste this chance, Sarah. Show the galaxy that humanity is more than warriors. Show them we can be neighbors and partners and maybe even friends. Show them that we are worthy of the future we fought so hard to reach." "I will, sir," Sarah said quietly. "I promise." The transmission ended, and Sarah turned to her crew. "All stations, report ready status." One by one, her officers confirmed that every system was operational. The engines hummed with power. The navigation computers had plotted their course. Everything was ready. "Helm," Sarah commanded. "Engage hyperspace drive. Take us out." The stars stretched and blurred as Pathfinder accelerated beyond the speed of light. In seconds, the ship crossed distances that would have taken years at conventional speeds. Earth disappeared behind them, a tiny blue dot that held everything humanity had ever known. Ahead lay the unknown. New worlds, new species, new challenges. And for the first time in history, humanity was racing toward them with open arms instead of clenched fists. Back on Earth, Daniel Hayes watched Pathfinder's departure from his office screen. Lisa Grant stood beside him, as she had for so many years. "Do you think they will be okay?" Lisa asked. Daniel considered the question for a long moment. "I think they will make mistakes," he finally said. "I think they will face problems we never imagined. I think some of them will not come home." He turned away from the screen and headed for the door. "But I also think they will do something we never could. They will prove that humanity is more than a species that knows how to fight. They will prove that we can also learn to live." Lisa followed him out of the office, into hallways that had been filled with tension for 50 years, but now felt strangely empty. The war was over. The real work was just beginning. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains. The sky burned orange and pink, colors that no alien world would ever quite match. It was beautiful. It was home. And somewhere out there among the stars, a ship full of humans was carrying hope into the darkness. The story of Earth had entered a new chapter, and no one knew yet how it would end. Let us prove it together. Outside the windows of Horizon Station, the stars burned cold and bright. Somewhere out there, angry species were plotting revenge. Somewhere out there, old hatreds were waiting to rise again. But in that moment, surrounded by creatures that had been enemies just months ago, Megan allowed herself to hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time it would work. Threll opened his eyes and looked at the human admiral. He saw no hatred there, no desire for revenge, just a steady determination that he was beginning to understand. "Very well," Threll said. "We will withdraw. We will wait." The transmission ended. Across the solar system, the remains of the Council fleet began the long process of retreating. Damaged ships were collected by their surviving comrades. The dead in space were marked for later recovery. On the Unity, cheers erupted as crews realized what had just happened. They had won. Against the greatest military force the galaxy had ever assembled, humanity had won. But Daniel did not celebrate. He knew this was only the beginning. "Lisa," he said quietly, "contact the president. We need to prepare for the next phase. The hard part starts now." His pride made the decision for him. "All ships," Threll commanded, his voice shaking but determined. "Attack formation. Target the human command vessel. Show these primitives what happens when they challenge the Council." Daniel watched the enemy fleet begin to move and felt no fear. This was the moment everything had been building toward. This was why his grandfather had started the program. This was why his father had given his life to the project. This was why he had spent every day since he was old enough to understand preparing for this exact fight. "All ships," he said calmly. "Battle stations. Let them fire first, and then show them what humanity can do." The Council fleet surged forward, 2,000 ships unleashing everything they had at the human positions. Plasma fire and missiles and kinetic rounds filled space with light and death, and the human fleet did not move. "Sir?" Lisa asked. Daniel turned to face her. "They came here expecting us to be afraid. They expected panic and chaos. Instead, we give them silence. Let that silence eat at them. Let them start to doubt." He looked back at the screens. "In 3 hours, we will show them what happens when you threaten Earth. But for now, let them sweat." In space, the Council fleet continued to wait. And as the hours crawled by, the unease that Threll had felt began to spread to his crews. The humans should have responded by now. The humans should have done something. This silence was wrong. This silence was terrifying. Something was very wrong. But by the time they understood what, it would be far too late. "Immediately," Zoloth replied. "The fleet will be ready in 6 months. By this time next year, the human problem will be solved forever." The meeting ended, and representatives scattered to their ships to carry the news home. War was coming to Earth. The greatest military force the galaxy had ever assembled would soon descend on humanity's only home. None of them knew what was waiting for them. On Earth, in his underground office, Admiral Daniel Hayes received a coded message from a spy buried deep in Council space. He read the words carefully. 2,000 ships. 6 months. Total destruction. He leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. Then he picked up his communicator and called his senior staff. "It is time," he said simply. "Begin final preparations. We have 6 months to finish what our grandparents started." The race had begun.